Assalamu alaikum and peace be unto you. You are tuned into the Mind of an Entrepreneur show, and I am your host, Sajdah Wendy Muhammad, and I got a special treat for you all tonight. So sit back, get your coffee, get your tea, get your iced tea, and get ready to learn. We're going to be talking to none other than the great pastor, Reverend Dennis Dillon. So stay tuned and don't go anywhere. I'll see you on the other side of these commercials, and we'll have this fabulous conversation.
O Allah, guide me among those whom Thou hast guided aright, and preserve me among those whom Thou hast preserved, and befriend me among those whom Thou hast befriended. Bless me in whatsoever Thou dost grant me, and deliver me from the evil of what Thou hast judged. Surely Thou judgest, and none can judge against Thee, and he whom Thou befriendest is not disgraced. Blessed art Thou, O Lord, and exalted be Thee above what they set up besides Thee. I bear witness, nothing deserves to be served besides Thee, and I bear witness that Muhammad is Thy servant and apostle. Amen.
You're tuned in to the Mind of an Entrepreneur show with your host, myself, Sajdah Wendy Muhammad. I am a multi-million-dollar business developer. I have developed business and real estate around the world, and I want to share with you my mental strategies, my technical strategies, and how I made it in the world of business. So I don't teach theory. I tell you about my life and introduce you to people who can also share with you what they've done to become successful. This is a practical show. This ain't a theory show. You don't want to miss it. So stay tuned. We are back, and you're tuned in to the Mind of an Entrepreneur show, and we got a special treat. But before we do anything, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. We have all kind of treats here for you. You know, my goal is to give y'all free game on how to navigate the world of business. I give you the game for free and I charge for services. My goal is to help you become happier, healthier, wealthier, and to experience more love. And I'm going to introduce to you today a friend of mine, Pastor Dennis. And let me just read his bio and this bio doesn't do him justice, but I just want you to get to know him a little before we start talking, okay? So Pastor Dennis carries a strong teaching anointing and has been in pastoral ministry for almost 40 years. He is an accomplished Bible scholar. Did y'all hear that? An accomplished Bible scholar, community empowerment strategist, and publisher of the New York Christian Times newspaper, as well as several books, magazines, and periodicals. He has provided leadership in several key corporate community economic benefit negotiations and has worked with many small businesses, community organizations, and major corporations, including Macy's, McDonald's, Chase, Citibank, AAA, and the Daily News, to bring resources and impact to local communities. He serves on several boards, including the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce, and is the global convener for the Door of Our Return. In recognition of his work, he has been honored with well over 200 national and local awards, including recently recognized as one of the top 10 New York leaders alongside Reverend Al Sharpton, and New York Governor Cuomo. Pastor Dennis is married to Dr. Zianzile Dillon, and they are blessed with 5 children and 5 grandchildren. Just hearing that, now y'all see why I wanted to have this brother on the show, because like me, he ain't scared to combine spirituality with business. And I'm going to bring my brother in here today. Assalamu alaikum, peace and blessings.
Assalamu alaikum, my beloved sister. Blessings on you, and grace, mercy, and peace be unto you. What a pleasure it is to be with you. I'm excited about your work.
I'm excited about you because, you know, Reverend Dillon, as somebody who came out of the corporate world, I used to kind of hide my spirituality a little bit. I knew who I was on the inside, and I was careful about how I moved. Like maybe they didn't know why we would go on business trips. I'd go to my room at 10 because I didn't want to be part of some of the wild stuff. But as I began to mature, I just said the spiritual me and the business me got to come together because we need some divine intervention to get us up out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt. And I believe that the people of God have a responsibility, no doubt, to be in the marketplace. We have a tendency to lock ourselves in our mosques, in our churches, in our temples,
That's
in
right.
our synagogues, and spend little time along the halls and the corridors of corporate America, government America, which is really where God, Allah, desire for us to be, so that the real transformation can take place. And so I'm excited about what you're doing there. This is natural, which is an area that we have failed miserably. If you go back to the books, whether we're looking at the Quran, the Talmud, or the Bible, it is so clear that God desires for his people to have dominion. Literally, that means that God wants us to be in control, and we relinquish to a great degree this control to almost everybody else.
You know, isn't it interesting? And I don't know at what point in our history this happened, but when you go back and you study the early phases, of Christianity, of Islam, where those faiths were, people were converted as a result of being in the marketplace. There was trade and commerce that people came to know and become converted to these new religions. And then at some point, all of the religion and spirituality was taken out of business. Do you recall when that happened or why that happened?
I think it has happened over a period of time, and the reality is if we speak frankly, the impact that we've seen in terms of this dichotomy between religion and business is really largely, mostly only in Black communities. It doesn't really happen in much of the rest of the world. In fact, if we look, we're going to find that the strength of almost everybody else's economy is their faith. I happen to do quite some traveling, and the reality is I've been to many Muslim-owned malls in Africa. You know, in South Africa, the Mall of America is literally the largest mall on the continent, is really built and controlled heavily by Muslim, and there is a mosque in that mall. Unfortunately, most of the shoppers are Black, and most of us don't necessarily visit those mosques, but they're literally there. If we go back and look in the Caucasian world, the reality is the reason why there's a Trinity Wall Street at the top of Wall Street, it is because it was the Trinity Church that built Wall Street. When we go back and we look in the hamlets and the communities all across America, I have to remind folks time and time again that steeples, for which we have difficulties understanding why churches and temples and mosques in this modern society are built with steeples. They were traditionally built with steeples because the highest building in town back in those days was the church, the temple, or the mosque. And all around that temple or that church is the business district. So you want to know where business is transacted, follow the church steeple.
Okay.
And so how do we recreate that, particularly in the Black world? Because it is only in the Black world, whether we're talking about Black America, we're talking about Blacks across the continent of Africa, Europe, the Caribbean, wherever, it is only in the Black world that we have literally divorced our faith from our economics. And the end result, we have a faith that is really taking us nowhere, and everybody else is having the economics, and we become the consumers and never the merchants.
That's powerful. When we were together at the State of the Black World with Dr. Ron Daniels and Dr. George Frazier, you gave me this book that has become my Bible. It's called, for those of you who don't know, The Economic Report for the State of the Black World. And I just want to talk about a couple things. You give us data, and it's so beautifully illustrated. You give us data on youth and education, Black buying power, housing, home ownership and foreclosure, global remittance, Africa, the Caribbean, and the world, population growth and the impact of Africa, wealth disparities, imports, exports, Black businesses, entrepreneur. And then on the very first inside here, you have an article entitled "The Needle is Not Moving." And you made a statement that was alarming that I want you to talk about. It says, when it comes to economic inclusion, it looks like Blacks are included. It feels like we are included. We oftentimes act like we are included and speak like we are included. But when you look at the numbers, it is so glaring that we are not included.
And, that is huge. I must say, we've been doing the Economic State of the Black World Report, the Economic State of Black America Report, and we haven't gone to every major, Black communities in America yet, but we do the Economic State of Black New York Report. Those are the three reports that we do. The reality is I'm disturbed, I'm troubled, because the reality is we've seen such great progress from the Asian community. And in most cases, it is the Black freedom movement, it is the Black civil rights movement, and it is the Black Rainbow Push, Rainbow Coalition movement that has actually facilitated the economic rise and the economic growth of all of the other groups that wraps around the so-called American minority community.
That's right.
We have seen in this age, Asians are doing better than whites in almost every category. I'm not sure if you noticed that in the report.
I did. I always
There are a whole lot more black, more Asian businesses than there are white businesses as it relates to per capita. There's a whole lot more, Asians have a much higher, income than their white counterparts. Asians are doing better in school than whites. And sadly, in all the categories, blacks are at the very bottom. I was shocked to see that 5 years ago in our report, blacks were number 2 behind whites as it relates to home ownership. Now we are number 4. We are behind, Asians have moved to the second place. Latinos are third, and blacks are at the bottom. So it does appear as if we are slipping back instead of moving forward. If black folks would spend more time talking about how we empower black people and not just how we so-called empower minorities, a troubling term for me, or how we empower this rainbow of different groups and different races, because at the end of the day, they are benefiting from our activism around civil rights, around human rights, and sadly, we are not moving forward. And I think those are areas that we have to take a hard look at.
That's important. I want to ask you something, because what I think is that, and I think we talked about this briefly, it's the crisis economy that the Asians actually benefited from that I think catapulted them to number 1. So not only did they do it on our backs, they came into our communities, treated us like crap because we were the only ones that would allow them in our community, because they were, I guess you could call it, redlined or stopped from being able to open businesses in other communities. And as a result of that crisis, they facilitate a sense of unity, because not all Asians get along. Not the Vietnamese don't always get along with the Koreans and the Chinese, et cetera, but they've united together to now become number 1 in the United States, a place where they weren't allowed to go anywhere but the ghettos of America and do business.
Mm-hmm. And I think if we streamline our focus, if we spend less time talking about black folks not being together and all of that, because the fact that I've spent a little bit of time in the Asian community, have made, I think, 3 or 4 trips to Seoul, Korea alone, and study their economy and what they do. These are people, if you look at the Chinese, the Japanese, the Koreans, or particularly in this case, South Koreans, and you look at the Indians, the Pakistani, none of these groups are really synchronized or working together. So I'm not sure if the issue is working together as the issue is working. And I think at the end of the day is, what is it that we are doing and how do we redirect our focus? My whole point about we looking like we are included is when the pictures are painted, we always have a tendency as a people, and I think it's the heart of black people across the globe. We love everybody. We want to bring in everybody. We want to embrace it. We want to make everybody feel good. We look at those who are disadvantaged like ourselves, and we want to help them out sometimes more than we want to help ourselves out. So at the end of the day, and I think that's why Jesus so clearly talk about the fact that we need to do first in Jerusalem, then in Judea, then in Samaria, and then to the uttermost part of the earth. If we ever break that down, we will understand that charity begins at home. And the first line for us has to be ourselves. And I think we have done this broad inclusion of everyone, that the end result is we've made little progress. That today, according to the Economic State of the Black World Report, and it's important that we understand this, the per capita GDP by race in America puts Asian at number 1 with $65,000. There, in other words, as it relates to per capita GDP, Asians are number 1. Per capita GDP, whites are number 2. The United States overall is number 3. blacks are all the way down at number 4, and then, Latinos at number 5, largely because a significant percentage of the Latinos are registered as blacks. So we got to get on a path. When we look at business ownership, and I'm talking about businesses with employees now, the fact that Asian represent less than 6% or so of the population, and 28% of Asians own businesses, compared with less than, and I say less than, a half, I did say a half, of 1% of blacks. So not even 0.5% of black people in America own businesses, and close to 30% of Asians in America own businesses. Why are we so busy trying to bring in Asians when we talk about economic opportunities, when we talk about directing resources to small businesses? But the reality is that's what almost every black politician in America does.
You brought up a good point when you talked about the unity piece, because I get that. It's not so much that they are consciously unified. They're just not against each other. That friction, you don't see. There's a sense of cooperative. I've been to Seoul a couple times too. And when you go there, you kind of see this sense of cooperation and cooperative economics. And they too are open with teaching. They don't have a problem bringing you through the factories, and I'm sure you saw that, like Samsung and Hyundai and all of the things, they'll bring you there and show you. But is it also a sense that in our community, yes, we are open and we feel sorry for everybody, but are we just not conscious? Are we just out of it to the point where we don't realize? We just look up and up the street, so-and-so got a business and so-and-so got a business, but we still over here struggling, trying to get off drugs, trying to stop drinking, trying to pay our rent. Is it just that we just aren't woke, to use that term?
Yeah, my beloved sister, Dr. Wendy, I think the reality is this. I saw years ago, as we were fighting and struggling to deal with the immigration issue, in my community in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, New York. And I've watched time and time again how the federal elected leaders, these are the congressional representatives, obviously, how anti-immigration they were. And at the end of the day, their anti-immigration posture journeys back to a desire to not bring in, obviously, Africans and Caribbeans, which obviously would represent the most significant population that would come in. Our big dilemma right now for Black people in America is that we're not growing at the pace that Asians are growing, or the pace that, if I could break it down, Indians are growing, or Filipinos are growing, or the Koreans are growing. We're not growing at the pace that the Latinos are growing, be that the Dominicans or the Colombians or the Mexicans, largely because through the power of immigration, they've been able to move to a place of power and control. And we're stuck because we've locked ourselves into this. So I'm not sure if I'm going to attribute that to the fact that we're not together, or more so that we live in a billow of ignorance. Because at the end of the day, just imagine if we open ourselves up and bring more Africans in who can own businesses, who can set up franchise operations. If we bring more Caribbean leaders and Caribbean businesses in, Black America would be in a much better place. And so because we've not been open to that, because of a mindset that some of them are taking jobs, the flip side is that what the Indians have done, created jobs. That's why they own Wayfair, the Indians. That's why they own many of these corporations. That's why they own and operate WeWorks. That's why they lead Google and all of these enterprises, because at the end of the day, if you check all their resumes, all of these are folks who have come that represent the Asian community. So I think the miseducation, the faulty perception has played some horrible games with us as Black people in America. And the only path to change and empowerment is if we begin to change this mindset. But I do believe strongly that if 10, 15 years ago, these leaders were saying, well, everybody is coming, let's bring Africa. You know, I spend a lot of time in Africa, and I'm telling you, there's a lot of wealthy people in Africa, a lot of great business leaders in Africa, but they're not doing business and competing in America because for some reason, Black folks, we will easily go and fight against apartheid, but not so easily challenge and encourage more Blacks from Africa and the Caribbean to come and to be a part of the economic mainstream. And in reality, where the communities are really growing and having positive impact, if you go to Brooklyn, the strength of the Black business community in Brooklyn is Caribbean. The growing strength of the Black business community in Harlem is the Africans.
Yeah.
And if we were doing this 15, 20 years ago, just imagine where we would be.
Very, very, very powerful point. So what you're saying is that the influx of the immigrants of these other communities is outpacing our natural growth. And
Absolutely.
Just because
and from an economic perspective, not necessarily from a population perspective.
Got it. Okay. No, I got it. I get it. And you're right, there are some wonderful business leaders throughout the African diaspora and on the continent that if we were doing business with them, we probably would see a faster change, and we would grow, I think, by leaps and bounds overnight. That's a very, very good point.
Yeah, and absolutely. And you know, the conference, the reSURGEnce conference in November, and we certainly want to invite and encourage your viewers to come and join us and to be a part of what's going to happen in November. We're talking about access to capital, access to government and corporate contracts, access to mentorship, access to resources. And we're bringing a delegation of, I'm expecting between 80 and 120 key African businesses and African leaders will be coming. Cities like Durban, South Africa, from which we have the Durban Accord, and we've had some of the most strategic conversation around racial healing on the continent of Africa. The city of Durban is bringing a huge delegation. They're looking to now partner up and pair up with African Americans and doing business with us. I think as we create this, we're going to see the needle move. And that's really what my passion is. The bottom line is the only way business is not conducted the way it was years ago. I say to folks every day, very little of the new development that's taking place across urban America, particularly in Black communities, when we look at gentrification and all of these new development, hardly any of them are being developed purely by Americans.
Right.
Almost all of them are developed by immigrants.
Right.
I mean, the Chinese have committed so hugely to this. There is a program in the federal government through Immigration and Naturalization Service that's called the EB-5, the EB-10 visas.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why the others don't fight the same battles around immigration as Africans and Latinos do is because that's how they do migration. That's how the Chinese been doing migration. All you need to do is to invest $500,000 in America, you get 5 green cards, almost automatically. You invest more, you get more green cards.
Yeah.
So just imagine if Africans in America were now saying, wow, we want to do business. Let's find the Africans in Africa. Let's find Africans in the Caribbean to now invest in our business. And they get these green cards. All of a sudden, immigration begin to look different for Black people in America. And every one of our communities will begin to look differently because now all of a sudden we'll begin to own more because we have our own people abroad investing in us in America, and we reverse that investment to an even greater degree, and now we'll begin to see the reformation and the transformation of Africa as a continent. Africa is way too rich to suffer from the kind of economic depravity that this continent suffers from.
I agree with you. I can't wait for reSURGEnce. I was just researching it, and I remember thinking to myself, now this is my kind of conference right here. You know, putting us in front of some deals and in front of where we can make partnerships and really build businesses is that's just my kind of conference. And what kinds of things should people be doing to prepare themselves for reSURGEnce? Just talk a little bit about it, where it's at, so that we can get more people there. And I'm gonna encourage it, because I'm really hard on conferences these days, because we spend a lot of money to go to them, but at the end of the day, we want to be able to walk away with something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate that question, my beloved sister, because it certainly speaks so clearly to the fact that this requires preparation.
Yes.
Our strategy going into the reSURGEnce conference, to be very, very clear, is to create what we're calling a global African economic renaissance. That is the mission and the mandate. We go back to the Harlem Renaissance in the 1920s that has really created this robust energy around entertainment, around arts, around culture, around the creative genius of our people. Our commitment around this renaissance, this African economic renaissance, is that this is that final area for which we really want to see Black people begin to really rise and aspire and move forward. When we go back and we look at many of the great African leaders who fueled the political renaissance in Africa, most of them had their start and came to Harlem, and were inspired here in Harlem, inspired by Malcolm X, inspired by Martin Luther King, inspired by Marcus Messiah Garvey, who himself came and ended up in Harlem. So my goal is to really bring people to Harlem in November for the primary purpose of sparking this resurge, this renaissance, if you will, that's going to really move us as a race of people forward. So in preparation, we want to encourage everyone to number one, if you're coming, let us know you're coming. Let us know what businesses you're in. Let us know what areas of interest you have, so that we can begin to look at how we pair you up with others, whether they're from the continent, they're other parts of the US, they're in New York, or wherever it is that they are. So we're committed to that peering agenda.
Right.
We've been having deep conversations around the outgrowth. So the plan is we come out of November's conference, November 16th through the 19th at Riverside Church and City College in New York. And as we come out of that, we're now planning and strategizing around what are the outgrowth, what are the takeaways, what are the follow-up. I'll give you an example. So Durban City is bringing a delegation that's coming to the conference. Their economic czar is coming, the head of their Chamber of Commerce is coming, and a host of other key strategic leaders are coming. So when they come, who can do business with us? Which amongst us in America can do business, and how do we move that forward? A part of my commitment, we have a company that's coming from another place called Pretoria in South Africa. And this is a company that manufactures engine oil, every kind of engine oil, coolant, motor oil, you name it, they manufacture it. How do we, on the American side, begin to become more committed to marketing products that are coming out of Africa? That's a big part of what we're deeply committed to. I remember years ago, I tested this theory out. I journeyed in, and it goes back to, again, we were talking about groups being united or not being united.
Right.
And I didn't realize, somebody told me, and so I started doing the research, that Koreans do not sell Chinese products. I didn't know that. I thought everything's made in China. I put that in quotes, by the way. It's not literally, but you start back looking at stuff, you find that almost everything you're picking up is made in China. And so I went into this Korean variety store and start picking up items and looking where it's made. And I pick up made in Korea, made in Korea, made in Korea, made in Korea. Almost everything you pick up in a Korean store is made in Korea, because most Koreans do not sell Chinese products.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just imagine if we begin to create, and we're very, 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 when it comes to the retail space for Black people in America, we are almost invisible.
Right.
We don't own a lot of retail operations. And most times we don't own retail because we don't have access to products in that regard. We have to fight to get some GM dealerships.
Distribution access. That's right.
Absolutely. The access to dealership is not there. The level of access to franchises are not there. We have to fight with these companies just to be able to sell their products. I remember spending 2 years negotiating, mind you, with and on behalf of Polo Ralph Lauren. And I could not even get Polo Ralph Lauren to the one thing in my negotiation with them for over a year. I'm negotiating with them. I worked through Polo Ralph Lauren around one of their biggest workforce dispute settlements. And in that settlement, I was not able to get Polo Ralph Lauren to commit to a single Black-owned retail store that sell their products.
Wow.
Couldn't get it. That's the only thing I did. I got them to advertise in Black newspapers and magazines, including, Black Enterprise and a host of others. I got them to commit dollars to community initiatives, but I could not get Polo Ralph Lauren to commit to making sure that there are some Black-owned retailers that sell their products.
It wouldn't give up.
So the fact that Africa is so endowed with resource and capacity, and of course we have to move from just the mining to the minting, we have to move from just the farming to the factory and manufacturing, and that's a process, and that's how these linkages will help to fuse this kind of collaboration that can really bring this about. So my whole point is I want to now make sure that more of us in America have access to be able to sell products out of Africa. The largest company, and this is a positive, in Nigeria, or close to the largest company in Nigeria, happens to be Black-owned.
Right.
And this particular company manufactures flour, they manufacture cement, they manufacture pasta, they manufacture a whole line of grocery products. Where can I go buy them in America? They manufacture rice and flour. Black people use rice and flour. We use pasta, we use macaroni. Why can't we have those products on the shelves in America? And we know that there are layers of battles that we have to go through for that. But the most important thing is, can we now begin to find Black people in America who are in business and are committed enough to begin to say, I want to distribute Dangote flour in America. I want to begin to distribute and become the global representative to get Dangote cement in Trinidad and Tobago or some other place where Black people are the majority consumers and in most cases the majority population.
Yeah, when I was in Nigeria, I was blown away with the number of products. I was on this Nigerian Shark Tank panel. And the amount of products that came, I mean, we had a long line of people who just wanted to come and pitch and showcase their products. And when I tell you I was blown away, there was a lot. But you're right. The layers that we're going to have to negotiate so that even if we have certain key strategic stores that carry these projects, I have a friend that makes styrofoam, like a styrofoam alternative. It looks like styrofoam, but it's biodegradable. and those things we use for food with the top that
Yes,
falls over.
yes.
And I was telling them, I said, we need this in the States, but
Yeah,
they need
absolutely.
help trying to figure out how to bring it over here.
And it's not difficult. I think the hard part, the missing link in all of this, Dr. Wendy, is the fact that there needs to be more Black people in business in America that's on the distribution side. So let me share the real weakness, because sometimes we miss this.
Yeah.
The greatest weakness why this is not as viable for Black people in America and obviously on the continent as it is for the Asians, as it is for the Europeans, is simply the fact that it is only African Americans, a term that I don't use very often, but it applies in this sense. It is only African Americans who are totally lost in America because we have no knowledge or sense as to where we came from. And no amount of ancestry.com or any other kind of genealogical science is going to fix this problem, because it has been so historic and it has been so long. So at the end of the day, when the Chinese come, they know who to do business with back home. Because they have relatives and they have friends back home. The Italians know who to link back with back home. The Indians know who to link back with back home. But the African Americans in America have no clue who to link back home, because we've been so removed that we have no clue if we're Nigerian American, Ghanaian American, if we are Zimbabwean American, or whatever it is, because those key relational connection has been lost as a result of 430 years almost of the kind of enslavement that Black people have suffered from in America. So we have to start from a new place and saying we are now all related, and we're going to come together and we're going to work together as one, create more synergy, do more traveling. Black people got to stop going to Africa. I mean, to go to the safari. We got to stop going with humanitarian agendas. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't do that, but that should never be our focus. We're going to have to begin to go and strengthen tourism on the continent. We have to begin to go and see who do we do business with. In fact, the reality is, if you look at the Black church in America, and you look at the evolution of the Black church in America, the reality is that there's no strong presence that the African Methodist Episcopalian Church has in Africa, have no strong presence. The Church of God in Christ have no strong presence in Africa. National Baptist Convention have no strong presence in Africa. We could keep going, but guess what? The Assemblies of God does. The white denominations do. So we've not even been able, and obviously these are some deep historic issues. We can't totally blame these things on ourselves.
Right.
We didn't create the problem, but we have to now recognize that in this resurgence movement, we're the ones that have the power to fix a problem that others have created. And that has to be the way forward.
Yes, I'm looking forward to reSURGEnce. What's the website where people can go? I'm going to, when we air this, we'll put it in the chat. What's the website so people can go and start registering?
reSURGEnceconference.com.
Okay.
reSURGEnceconference.com. It is simply that. Just go to reSURGEnceconference.com. We want to invite and encourage everybody to register. We will be in communication with you over time, because we want to know how you want to link. If you are in connection with the company in Nigeria that sell those containers, we want to link them, because we want to make sure that all of us are coming to the table and we're finding synergy. The real estate development piece for us is going to be huge. We're looking to peer that. We want to see more Africans developing. I was along the Durban waterfront only about 2 months ago. Tremendous. It's just beautiful. It's just amazing. And there's no African American presence. African Americans, we go all across the world buying timeshares. Why can't some African American developers go to Durban, right along the seashore, the beautiful waterfront that, by the way, everybody's developing. The Chinese are coming there developing. The Indians are heavy in Durban. They're developing. And guess what? When they end up developing, guess what? They perpetuate the wealth and it never translates to us.
That's right.
The fact that, I got to just share this quick fact, and it's in the report. The fact that blacks in South Africa has a per capita GDP, I need nobody to miss these numbers, per capita GDP of $3,600 US, aggregated over a period of a year. I don't want to do a wrong definition of per capita, but but the simple way is the earning of that individual,
Right.
aggregated over the period of a year,
Right.
is less than $3,700. $3,700, less than what most people in America make in a month.
Mm-hmm.
Or half of Americans make in a month.
Right.
Guess what? For whites, it is the highest in the world.
What?
$121,000 is the per capita GDP for whites in South Africa.
In South Africa.
36 times that of blacks in South Africa. White unemployment is 6%. Black unemployment is 40%. These are deep issues. And I don't want us to lament the problem. I simply want us to understand how key and critical it is for us to orchestrate solutions.
Yeah, it is. And I think we're the ones to lead that charge. But, when I spent time in Africa, and this is my last question, I'm gonna let you go. I know I've been holding you, but I want to hear your thoughts on this. The Chinese are everywhere in Africa. They build airports, all of these bridges and infrastructures. They behind the walls, coming out at night, working in Liberia, Nigeria, Benin, all throughout South Africa. It's like everywhere I've gone, not just in West Sub-Saharan, but even East, the Chinese are there. And it's a feeling of dominance. What does that mean for the future of Africa and the future of our relations? Because it's one of those things where it's almost like people are asleep on it. They tell you about it. Oh, the Chinese bought this mall, or they're building this or that. But nobody's saying what this really means.
That's a perplexing issue for us, troubling issue for us. I first gotta say, the only solution that I see is for Black people in the diaspora to step up. That for me is the number one solution. If we could conceivably work with African leadership on strategizing around some of the kind of community benefits agreement that we have drafted in America, in many American cities, if we could share those ideas, if we could share the 10 and 12 point strategies that I've seen Jesse Jackson use and Andrew Young, I've used that in helping to negotiate the Barclays deal. And I got that and learned those reviewing the Staples Arena deal. If we begin to put together, and if we begin to really structure these kind of deals and say to governments, let there be a solid 12-point strategy in all of your negotiations with these governments and with these companies and corporations coming out of China and probably every place else for that matter. I think that would help. But I think the greater help is for more Black businesses across the globe to become more shovel ready, to strengthen their capability and their capacity to do big business so that they can negotiate. I have a sense, because I spend some time with a lot of African government leaders, I have a sense that they're open to do more business with the African diaspora, but the African diaspora has to become stronger.
Right.
And I think that's a part of what this conference is designed to help to facilitate. I met with Dr. Julius Garvey, the son of Marcus Messiah Garvey. He and I just 3 or 4 years ago went and we had a meeting with the president of Ghana, and interestingly enough, we're sitting waiting to meet with the president of Ghana, and while we're sitting, a Chinese contingent came in, and obviously they were also now waiting to meet, so we didn't know what was going on. And then we see about 5 or so Chinese coming out of the president's office, and we went in, and as we were coming out, another Chinese group were actually going in, and we weren't even going in to talk about big business. So I say capacity.
I got
we
it.
have to build capacity. We have to strengthen that capacity. But it is a problem. It's not just a problem in Africa. It's a problem in the Caribbean and every place else. I would certainly say better the Chinese than the colonizers, who have literally raped Africa, the entire continent of Africa. And the rape has been excruciating. It is not even a regular rape. It's a murderous kind of rape. Just to think that in 10 years alone, this number is going to blow everybody's mind. In 10 years alone, the so-called landlords in South Africa, 10 years from 1911 to I think 1921 or 1922, they rake and pull out of Africa, just those 10 years, over a 5-mile radius in excess of 120 million euros.
Yeah. We got work to do, Reverend Dennis. And I'm going to, inshallah, I'll be there with you in November. And we'll meet and talk and try to put some deals together and do our part to build this legacy of economic empowerment for our people here in the diaspora and on the continent.
Dr. Sajdah, Wendy, Muhammad, God bless you. It is such an honor to be with you. I pray God's blessing, God's peace upon you and over you. Thank you. And assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you so much, sir. All right. Y'all see why we bring these powerhouses. We continue to bring emerging new market leaders, industry disruptors. And that's what Reverend Dennis is. He's an industry disruptor because the type of strategic planning and strategic thinking that he is doing, you just don't find it every day among us religious folks, church folk, black folk. A lot of us are just trying to get the bag. A lot of us are just trying to figure out how we can put a bigger and bigger deal together. Nothing wrong with that in context, but we're nation building. We're talking about moving forward. So with that, family, sign up for the conference, reSURGEnce.com, reSURGEnceconference.com. I'll put it in the chat for us to start registering and get ourselves to that conference. Harlem is just down the street. It ain't that far from Chicago. We can hop on the plane. Let's get there and let's do some business. Let's get in front of some deals, some checks, and do some strategic planning with our brothers over there and brothers and sisters over there in Harlem. All right, family, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. If you like this information, if you like what we're offering to you, then make sure you like and subscribe. And don't forget to support the completion of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad House. You can do that in 2 or 3 ways, okay? One way, you can just straight up donate cash. You can do that through our Cash App, and that's scrolling across the bottom. That's $Mo Today, MOETODAY. Number 2, You can go to sajdahhousedonations.com. Okay. But here's the other two ways that I think are much more impactful. Become a sponsor. Put your name in the house. Sponsor a room. Sponsor one of the gardens. Sponsor the theater. The finish line is in sight. You all know it's a huge project, and we're probably 4 or 5% away from getting it completed. So then you can always get the commemorative Elijah coins and some other products that we have on the website, and that's at sajdahhouse.com. All right, family. I'm going to show y'all a couple of videos. Don't go anywhere. But while you are sitting here listening, make sure you like and subscribe to the page. All right. Peace and blessings, family. We'll see you all Saturday for the continuation of our Women of the Bible series on the Sajdah Saturday Morning Coffee Talks. That's where we talk about life, love, and business. May Allah bless each and every one of you. Thank you.
And I'm saying this to all of us. Our people are ready to spend their money with their own. There's no time better than this for 6 or 8 of you to pool your money and look in the community and open up a store to fulfill the needs of our people, and we will support you. It's your time now. That's being a man. Supporting your own people that are in business. Going into business yourself. Think out of the box. What can you create that will put black people to work?
Greetings, conscious entrepreneurs. Add the Mind of an Entrepreneur show to your Roku TV lineup and catch up on past episodes of all your favorite Mo Today shows.